Welcome to One on One. I'm Cyril Stober. In June 2024, President Tinubu signed an executive order on the designation and protection of critical national information infrastructure, CNII, under the authority of the Cybercrimes Prohibition Prevention Amendment Act. Now, the Nigerian Communications Commission has the mandate to put into operation the CNII order. Today, I sit with the Director of Technical Standards and Network Integrity of the Nigerian Communications Commission, Engineer Eduyemi Ugu, who chairs the Industry Working Group for the implementation of the CNII order. Welcome to One on One.
Thank you very much, Cyril.
Now let's start easily. We see this executive order as one that aims at protecting telecoms infrastructure from theft, vandalism, and such other crimes. But let's hear it from you. Take us through what exactly the CNII order is. Let's start from that premise.
Thank you very much, Cyril. And good evening, viewers. The CNII order is an order that has been enacted by the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, like you rightly stated, last year in June. And that order basically aims to protect the infrastructures that has been designated as critical for the socio-economic and security as well as safety of lives and properties of Nigerians. They are very critical. Now, and that particular order actually covers about 13 different sectors of the economy, of which the telecommunication sector is just one of them. The information and communication technology sector is just one of them. Because you also have the aspect that covers the power sector. It also covers the water, energy, health, education, mines and steel, and a couple of other very critical sectors that, if anything, happens negatively to infrastructures that actually underpins the provision of services in those sectors we have, and will be injurious to either the socio-economic well-being of Nigerians, to the economy of Nigerians, or to the security and safety of Nigerians, or even have national security implications also. So the CNII is basically meant to provide an elevated measure of protection for those infrastructures that have been identified as critical to the delivery of those services in those 13 sectors. So that's what it is.
All right, and it all falls under the purview. That's the mandate of the Nigerian Communications Commission to drive the operations of particularly this critical sector we're dealing with, telecommunications here and then. Now, interestingly, it mentions denial of access and poor services. But that has been a huge challenge all along, even as the telecommunication industry expanded just after the act establishing the NCC.
Yes, you're very correct. One of the things we found out is this. Initially, post the licensing of the GSM operators in year 2000, and they started operation in 2001, you notice that the trend has been, or rather the focus has been on growth, providing infrastructure. If you recall, cast your mind back, the total telephony subscribers in the whole country was less than 500,000 at that time. So the focus as at that time was to ensure that we roll out the infrastructure, provide access to Nigerians. And the industry has actually grown very, very fast, and where we are having well over 180 million subscriptions as at date. And we have now transitioned to the point where, based on that expansion, we are focused on now ensuring that Nigerians get the required service quality that they are paying for. And in providing those quality, the CNI plays a very critical role in that. Because like you stated, we've had scenarios in the industry where we are having things like denial of access. By denial of access, we mean, and it can come from in different guise. It's either based on insecurity. You're not able to access your site because there's insecurity. Sometimes it's due to communities actually preventing the providers from carrying out very critical maintenance activities on their sites, which leads to site outages. Sometimes it's even landlords where those infrastructures are actually located in their premise, taking those out, while at other times, obviously, criminal elements that are actually preventing those access to those sites. And so, on that perspective, we, as Nigerian Communications Commission, we've basically bifurcated it into two aspects. Those aspects that are within the control of operators, which relates to having the investments, putting the required investments into place to ensure that they provide the adequate capacity for Nigerians to access, to address the congestion issues or quality of service issues in those areas. But having done that, if the required protection for those infrastructures are not there, then it means that the investments that have been put in place, the objective for which it was put in place cannot be achieved. And that is why the promulgation of that particular order by the president is so critical. Because, I mean, say, for example, I'll give you an indication. From January to June, we've had about 20,000 across the country. And one of the things that those fiber cuts do is that it actually takes out critical services to Nigerians. The analogy I like to use in describing fiber cuts is, I like to use the human anatomy. So your body, you have your veins and your blood vessels. So the fiber is actually like your veins and your blood vessels that take the nutrients from your body to all parts of your body. So imagine someone cutting it, and you find out that the impact is really quite huge. And that's the sort of impact we are having. And that's why we believe that the critical national information infrastructure, which aims to both prevent or find a coordination mechanism that forces all relevant stakeholders to coordinate to prevent the damage of infrastructure because of for any particular reason, or denial of access to sites, or even theft of infrastructure. So basically, those are some of the things that we have.
The question of theft is a little bit interesting because you have an industry that not everybody can play in. Yes. So if these infrastructure are stolen, surely it's either by people who know the worth, or they're sold to people who are in the industry. And that's the confusing bit about it.
Yes. Now, for the theft aspect, in telecoms, there are various components that are required to provide services. You have the power component. So every site usually comes with 2 generators. Generators are used everywhere, all right? Sites are also come with batteries, big batteries to provide backup power just in case you have a cut, either in the generator or the public power supply. So you have the backup battery to provide the power source to the equipment at that point in time. But you and I also know that batteries are very useful for inverters in homes. So you see a lot of times we're having scenarios where those batteries on sites are being stolen. All right, because there's already market for it. You have scenarios where diesel that have been supplied to the generators to power the sites are being stolen. You have the also very serious cases where the whole generator, 27 kVA generators, are actually being stolen from the sites. So it's not just the stealing of the telecom equipment itself only, though that's another trend that we're beginning to see. But it's actually also the stealing of those infrastructures that you require to be able to enable you provide services from those telecom infrastructures that are deployed across the country.
You mentioned about the fiber cuts, for instance. I mean, what would those be, if not in the industry?
Okay, now the fiber cuts that we see currently are fiber cuts that are due to varied reasons. One, construction activities, for example. We know roads are critical. We need to have very good roads across the country. But one of the things we tend to see is the fact that sometimes during those road construction, you are having damage to those fiber infrastructures. And of course, when those fiber damages occur, there's disruption to service to Nigerians until those infrastructures or those fiber actually are resolved or rectified in terms of the damage and those cuts. And that's one thing. Another area that we're also seeing is the issue of vandalization, where people deliberately actually go and vandalize the fiber. They vandalize it. And recently, we are now beginning to even see people now stealing the fiber cables. Because sometimes some people see the fiber cable, they believe it's copper that is inside. Because it's a fiber cable with black dots. It's a cable, they believe there's copper inside. So sometimes people go in there and take rows and rows of it off, not knowing that the impact of those activities is quite huge. Because sometimes there are some fibers that you can actually take out. It depends on the segment that fiber cable is and which equipment is connecting. You can actually take out a whole state and deny a whole state of telecommunication services. And like the CNI actually clearly identified, telecoms equipment or telecom services is quite critical to Nigerians right now. It's something we call infrastructure of infrastructures, meaning it provides the enablement for other industries and other sectors of the economy to thrive. Take, for example, the banking sector. A lot of us, we are very comfortable these days. We sit down in our homes and you're able to take your phones and carry out your banking transactions from the comfort of your homes, your office, or wherever, without having necessarily to go to the bank to do that. Some people that are old enough, they will probably remember those days of Nigerians going to the bank and asking for and tallies are given to you when you get to the bank. This is your number. You have to wait for your number. But telecoms has made that go away because you can actually sit down in your home and rely on the telecom infrastructure, telecom services to gain access to your banking transactions and carry out those services. Another area some of us sometimes take for granted these days are those ride-hailing services. You sit down in your home. Before you want to take a ride, you have to go to the road and get those. But the telecom infrastructure has been able to provide that platform for innovators to actually bring up new business cases and new business models. One is the ride-hailing services. So you can actually be in your home and order for a ride and take that. Where do you think that runs on? It's the telecom infrastructure that is making that possible. Because without that, it's completely impossible. Another one that I always like to say, that I say that with my little niece, is that of influencers. A lot of people, you go on your phone, on social media, you see you're on any of the social media platforms, you are following influencers, you're laughing on your phone. Without the telecom infrastructure, that is impossible. That particular segment does not exist. You have scenarios where media, right now, people are able to watch news content on their mobile phones. People are able to watch different sports programs on their mobile phones. People are able to watch films on their mobile phones or even on their TVs, on their smart TVs. What is the actual infrastructure that is making that possible? It's the telecom infrastructure. So if you look at it from a broad view, I mean, even if you want to order for the e-commerce sites, these days you can sit down at your home and order for anything and it will be delivered to your home. What is making that possible is because you have the telecom infrastructure. The POS operator, let's even bring it down to the POS operator on the streets that is trying to carry out POS transactions on their POS and making sure that when you go to the POS, it's able to give you cash and make their 200 naira commission from each transaction or whatever the amount is that they make from each transaction. And they're able to make that to feed their families at home. What do you think drives that? The telecom infrastructure. And if you look at it, so it actually cuts right across different sectors of the economy that is making it possible, that the telecom sector has actually made much more productive, much more efficient, and provided the employment both directly for people that work in the sector and indirectly by enabling new models to actually thrive on those telecom services that has actually been provided. And that is why the CNI promulgation by the president is very, very timely, because imagine that is not possible. I always tell people, imagine a lot of us, when you leave the home in the morning and you forget your phone, think of how you feel. You feel that, oh, you've forgotten something. You feel something is missing. And that actually goes to the crux of the matter. And that's because you find out that a lot of the things you do right now depends on the phone. Because you leave your phone, the utility that it brings to your life, the simplicity it brings to your life, the removal of hassles it brings to your life, you find out that, oh, all of a sudden becomes very, very glaring. And that's why making sure that we all protect the infrastructure from damage by whatever means, and ensuring that Nigerians buy into this. Because sometimes it may be a bit difficult when Nigerians see those infrastructure, there's the propensity to say, it's not mine, it's nothing. And it's not because they don't want to actually take ownership of it. Sometimes it's because they don't really know the criticality of what it provides, even in health, even in security. You are having a security issue, an insecurity issue. If you are with a phone, you're able to call for help. If you're having a health challenge, or someone is having a health challenge, if you're with a phone, you're able to call your doctor and even get assistance, health assistance. So I can go on and on this, on the criticality of the telecom infrastructure and the need for us to protect it, and the critical role that fiber optic cables play in all this. That we're having about 20,000 fiber optic cuts in 6 months is way, way too high. And it's actually leading to the challenges that we're having also with the QoS in the industry right now.
Let's talk about the security of right from the source in this case. What's in place? Now you talk about the fiber optic cables. Those we know easily can be damaged through road construction, deliberate acts of vandalism, and sabotage. Yeah. But then there are also other attacks which can be carried out, which are not necessarily physical.
Yeah, obviously. And the CNI envisages that there are cyber attacks also that could be carried out in cyberspace to try and protecting that. But these things you need to bifurcate into two. There is the physical protection that you need to make sure, which I believe should be reasonably not too as complicated as the non-physical. Because non-physical, the threat area is huge. The person can be anywhere. But for the physical that we see, to ensuring that we address those aspects first, while we are also ensuring that the non-physical are also addressed. Now, to address these areas, the NCC has a strategy in place. One of those strategic areas, one of the things that we are doing is to first of all set the standards for the industry. Those players that actually own this infrastructure. What are the standards they are required to meet to ensuring that their infrastructures are properly protected first? From do their own bit at least. Right. It's like the saying, you build a house and you don't put a door and you think that the police is going to protect you. You have to put your house first, put your door, make sure your door has a key, isn't it? And you make sure that when you're leaving your house, you lock your door. So if any other thing happens, then you know that at least you've done those things that is within your power to do. So we are putting those standards, or we have put those standards in place to ensure that operators comply with those standards. Then, of course, the next thing that, as per strategic area that we're doing, is as per awareness. And of course, me being here is one of those strategies also. Awareness, meaning that Nigerians are able to be aware that there is a particular order called the CNI order with serious implications for people that actually go against the provisions of that order. Because like lawyers say, ignorance of the law is not an excuse. No lawyers say that. Ignorance is not an excuse. So we are using this opportunity to inform Nigerians that don't damage infrastructure. Make sure that you don't do certain things to those infrastructures because the implications are huge. And of course also highlight the benefits that those infrastructure is bringing to their lives. They know it, but they don't relate or equate those benefits to that into the infrastructure that is actually providing those services to them. So this awareness aims to bridge that gap. Then the next aspect we're also doing is with respect to collaboration. we are collaborating with different agencies of government. Say, for example, Federal Ministry of Works. We are collaborating with different state governments. We've discussed with the Kogi state government. We've discussed with the Lagos state government. We've discussed with the Bauchi state government, the Edo state government, different state governments to try, because again, construction does not stop only at the federal level. You have state governments also carrying out road constructions. So we are collaborating, carrying out a lot of collaboration to get that done. Then also, as part of the strategy of the Nigerian Communications Commission, we are also carrying out mediation, because we know that there are scenarios where genuine misunderstandings will result between service providers, that's telecommunication service providers, and other stakeholders. Could be landlords, could be communities, could be state agencies, or even the state government. So we come in there to try and mediate, to reach out, to try and get, or rather to get a common a resolution to those misunderstandings. We've done that in different states. We've done that in Kogi State. We've done that in Bauchi, in Osun State, and a couple of other states where we've seen a couple of these misunderstandings of what I'll say it, that when we come in there, we've been able to resolve those issues. And of course, lastly, we go with enforcement. So if all this does not fit, then we go with enforcement. And with enforcement, because as part of the order for the Critical National Information Infrastructure, the Office of National Security Advisor is the coordinating body for ensuring the implementation of that order across the 13 sectors. NCC is only responsible for the telecommunications sector. So the Office of National Security Advisor coordinates to ensuring that that order is fully implemented across all sectors. So from the NCC perspective, we engage very robustly with the Office of National Security Advisor and was also with the NSCDC to ensuring that those force aspects required to resolving issues, to ensure that culprits who vandalize infrastructures, culprits who are involved in theft of infrastructures are actually dealt with by the law enforcement agencies. I must, at this juncture, actually also commend the Office of National Security Advisor, because one of the things that we've seen now from that office is the fact that there's a lot of focus in ensuring the full operationalization of this order. And there's even a full director of a Major General Kadan, Air Vice Marshal, that has been charged on the Office of National Security Advisor as the Director of Critical National Assets and Infrastructure to actually drive directly that operationalization across the sectors.
Let's take just a short step back a little while and talk about the standards which are supposed to regulate. And how would you assess the current standards, given the infrastructure? And beyond that, we'd still like to know the role of technology, new technologies, in ensuring that, I mean, it's not just, you talk about the fiscal and the non-fiscal. You have large areas, even with the physical, and monitoring is part of that.
Exactly. Now, so for the standards, one of the things we've put in place as part of the standards is to ensure that things like, for example, intrusion detection systems are deployed at the various sites. We have well over 40,000 sites across the country providing services. So you want to make sure that when someone comes within a particular perimeter, a particular radius of that site, you're able to be notified at the various network operating centers to ensure that the relevant agencies or relevant bodies or relevant intervention entities are notified if that occurs. Of course, there are also standards to ensuring that we have the right type, the CCTVs at each of those sites to ensure a view, remote view on those sites. And of course, we also have physical security in terms of the private security personnel required for those sites. Of course, we also have standards that deals with how even the cables are laid on the site, because that is a critical component. We have standards in terms of ensuring that your generators are properly maintained, that you are not having diesel or oil and your site is unkempt, looking unkempt. So those are some of the standards we've put in place. And we also have standards in terms of ensuring that you have fencing across your sites to ensure, and the fencing in terms of the minimal height of the fencing and the type of fencing that is required, that you are required to put. Lighting also for those sites. So those are some of the standards that we've put in place. As per the level of adherence of those standards, a lot of those standards have been adhered to, but of course for the 40,000 sites that we have across the country, it will take a while for every single one of them, obviously, for that standard to be fully adhered to across all the sites.
So in the matter of enforcement, where do you stand there? Because it starts within.
Yes.
If the enforcement mechanism is seen to be weak, then it is an incentive for wider attacks on the physical infrastructure. So let's start from that premise and look at that.
Okay, so in terms of the enforcement,
Yes.
you mean? Yes, of course. One of the things that NCC has done really is to make sure that we go very hard on our licensees. Vis-a-vis we call them the collocation service providers, because in the telecommunications ecosystem, the mobile network operators are just one player. But there's a player that there's a category of player that most Nigerians may not know about. We call them collocation service providers. They are the ones that actually mostly own the towers. Those sites you see with the towers, most of them are not owned by the mobile network operators, the likes of Globacom or the likes of MTN, Airtel, for example. They don't own that. Globacom, for example, still builds its own tower, owns everything. But MTN and Airtel, for example, who are built by market share, are the two leading providers in Nigeria. They don't build their towers. Their towers are leased from those category of licenses we call collocation service providers. And for those collocation service providers, we have now we are taking action against them in respect of, one, we are monitoring their power availability, because the critical thing we do is this from an NCC perspective is, what is your power availability that you are providing? Because as a collocation service provider, you have to provide power to the telecom companies. Then you have to make sure that those power, if there's a fault, you resolve the faults on time. Those providers, we are holding them to account to ensuring that they meet the power availability targets that have been provided. Because if they meet those targets, it means that Nigerians will get good quality service. Because for the telecom equipment itself to be able to provide services to Nigerians, there needs to be power first. When you hold those providers to their power targets, they know that to meet the power targets, you must make sure that your infrastructure are properly secure. Because if they are stolen, and we find out from our audit of those scenarios that you've not done what you're meant to do that led to those stealing, then of course you face the sanctions, and the Commission does not shy away in putting those sanctions on those providers and ensuring that they do what they are required to do to ensure that Nigerians get the required service quality that they deserve and they pay for.
Tell us a little bit about the industry working group, which is meant to drive all of this, and who and what is it composed of?
Okay. The CNI Industry Working Group is meant to coordinate the efforts across the telecommunications sector in operationalizing the critical national infrastructure order that has been promulgated by the President. That's the general objective, to make sure it is operationalized and brought to life. The components or the membership of the body is the Nigerian Communications Commission. We have the mobile network operators, the co-location service providers, and of course, as well as the internet service providers and the fiber optic cable providers across the country, those that provide those infrastructures, to ensuring that we understand the operational challenges they are facing and articulate measures to addressing those challenges, and ensuring there is peer review across the industry, taking best practices that we know has worked, that a particular stakeholder has implemented and has worked, and ensuring other stakeholders are able to implement it, ensuring that we review the standards that have been set for the protection of the fiber or for another infrastructure, to see if they are working as they should work, in line with the statistical information that we get. Because again, they say, well, you cannot measure, you cannot improve. So we collect data every day. So basically right now, when there's an outage, NCC is mandated to be informed immediately. If the damage or if the outage lasts for 30 minutes, then they are required to put the particular outage, first of all, on the NCC's portal, the outage portal on the NCC, so that Nigerians can see it on the website. And they're also mandated to also put it on their social media handles, so that Nigerians can actually see those people that are impacted in those areas, can know that their services are out in this area, and they give them information as per when it will be resolved, what caused it, first of all, the outage, what caused it, and when it will be resolved. So at least, because if you have an outage and you are not given those information as per, you don't know anything about that outage, it leads to discomfort, it leads to unease. So we believe providing those information, being very, very transparent with Nigerians, so that making sure that Nigerians see everything very transparently, there's nothing to hide. If you have an outage, let your subscribers know that you have an outage. The regulator must know that you have an outage. And we track each of those outages to see how many outages we are having on a monthly basis, on a weekly basis, for example, and see over time whether we are coming down. And because, again, why that is important is because when you are implementing those strategies, you only can tell if those strategies are working from the statistics of the outages you are seeing come out. If you see that the trend is going down, you know that you're working. If the trend is not going down, regardless of whatever you're doing, then of course you need to ask the right type of questions. What is going wrong? What are the things that are going wrong in the strategy, in our approach in implementing the strategy? So those are some of the things that we do in the CNI Industry Working Group. But we also work in very, very close collaboration with the Office of National Security Advisor, because there are aspects of it that requires security interventions. And that is where they actually come in conjunction with the Nigeria Security and Civil Defense Corps.
At this point, we'll take a short break. When we return, there'll be more on the NCII order. So stay with us. We'll be right back.
NTA Tuesday Live, a network issue-oriented innovation talk show.
Why should we be in a difficult situation financially?
Once upon a time we were rich, but we're not a rich country anymore.
Disaster management is everybody's business.
In all these times, the organization turned to Nigeria.
We would as much want to harness the capacity that is within us so that we see how we can become self-reliant.
1 month ended and you said you are increasing warning strike by 2 months. I mean, you are incubating madness.
Even if these are officials of government who have been told to go and enforce the law and they have gone against the law itself, they must be held accountable.
One-on-One, Friday, 10:30 p.m. on NTA Network.
Thanks for staying with us. It's all about the Critical National Information Infrastructure Order 2024, and I'm here with Engineer Edu Yemi Ogo, who is Director of Technical Standards and Network Integrity of the Nigerian Communications Commission. He chairs the working group that is meant to operationalize the NCII order, and we've been looking at all aspects of it. Still, one more thing I'm interested in.
Yes.
Vandals could be at work, saboteurs, thieves who steal these cables. And the system suffers as a result of these damages to the critical infrastructure. However, we've seen here the handiwork of individuals. How does it work out when it's corporate organizations that are involved? And by that, anyway, let's start, and I'll tell you where I'm going there. If, for instance, a again, it is as a result of negligence. It's damage to the infrastructure. And sometimes the negligence may come from outside or from within. Are those captured under the order?
Oh, obviously. Basically, the order captures anything that impacts those infrastructures that has been designated as critical. So it doesn't matter whether it's someone that goes there to use an axe to do it, or a big organization that goes to use a big what's it called? A big truck
Or an earth-moving
equipment to do it. So
or even an agency of government.
Of government, yes. It doesn't really matter. It's whoever basically does that. There's a case that we had to mediate in, where it was actually a government, right, agency that actually locked up a site. And that site happens to interconnect a lot of other sites within Abuja. So meaning, once that site went down, it impacted other sites that are not even within that state. Because telecommunications networks work because all the infrastructures are interconnected, basically. And in that interconnection, there are sites that when you take down, it does not just take down that site alone, it takes down other sites that take their connection from this particular site, from that particular site that is impacted. Again, and that was due to scenarios where it was basically asserted that the service provider had not paid certain dues.
Right of way.
Right. In this case, it wasn't even right of way. It was something different. And the right of way was also involved, actually. But a couple of dues that they said they've not paid. And based on that, the access to the site was denied, basically. And critical maintenance activities that was required to be carried out on that site could not be carried out. Of course, eventually the site went down. When those sites go down, the community around that site that those sites provide services for in that state, people around could not make calls. They had terrible quality of service, even from the other network providers that were present, because it's one of the biggest network provider in the country that was impacted there. The NCC had to get involved and actually mediate, because the government is another government agency that was involved. So we had to mediate to try and resolve the issues. And it was good that we were able to resolve the issues, come to a common understanding for what the service provider needs to do. So they shifted position. Of course, the state government also shifted position to ensuring that they come in there. But the critical thing is, it shouldn't have even gotten to that. Because shutting down sites that have been categorized as critical is something that should not even happen. Now, a lot of people, because you mentioned something earlier as the advancement in technology, and the infrastructures currently play a very crucial role, not just in the social lives of Nigerians and the economic life of Nigerians, but also in the security of lives and properties. So sometimes taking down those sites may actually impact directly on the safety of lives that certain security activities actually depend on. And that's why we always say, please, to every single stakeholder, it doesn't matter whether it's a landlord, it's an individual, a community, a state agency, a state government, a construction company, don't touch those infrastructures. And it probably has to do with the type of way Nigerians probably look at telecoms. Because if, for example, you see someone touching your transformer in your area, and you know that you guys know what you have gone through in ensuring that that transformer is probably there in the first place, and you see anybody there in that transformer, there's every likelihood that you're going to ask, what are you doing there? Who are you? But that does not usually translate to telecom. You may see someone entering a telecom site, you pass as if you don't even know at all. Exactly. And that is because of the type of benefits or the type of importance that Nigerians ascribe to the services that these two infrastructures actually provide. So if we are able to bridge that gap, and that's where this awareness actually comes to play, and it's very critical, that Nigerians know that this is critical, this is important. You cannot say you want to go and take out a site. Probably your relative has a POS shop. Maybe it may even be the vandal that has two POS shops in that area. And he sees a site, this side there's cable, there's copper cable in this site, I'll go and steal it. Forgetting that you take that copper cable out, your two POS shops goes down. You're not able to make that connection sometimes. But that is still not an excuse, because the thing is, civic duty demands that if there's an infrastructure that has been put in there by either an individual or a corporate entity, you should have no business going there to touch anything.
Right.
Yep.
Let's look at the sanctions, and then we'll return to the matter of those who might be involved. You just talked about a government being involved in an incident which was resolved. However, we'll be looking at how far you've gone right down to because you'd see that a lot of these would occur at local council level, where you're dealing with local governments. And of course, but first, the sanctions. Mm-hmm. Because when people know the sanctions, then they probably would think twice, but what are those sanctions for those who go ahead and
damage infrastructure? Yes. You know, if you damage an infrastructure, that's because of that damage is ascribed to someone being injured or not being able to get the required type of assistance on time because of that damage, and leads to some serious harm to that person. There are jail terms. There are jail terms for up to 10 years. And that's what a lot of people don't understand. There are jail terms for longer if that damage leads to a death. You may not have gone out to say you want to kill someone.
Right, and where it leads to a compromise in the security architecture, as services are cut off and when they are critically needed.
Exactly.
And huge economic losses.
Exactly. That's a very valid point. Because, you know, sometimes it's not really the value of the infrastructure that is damaged that is the issue, but the impact of the absence of that infrastructure, that the absence of that infrastructure has on the general economy. So take, for example, you may actually say, oh, I see a cable, it's a copper cable, oh, it's an armored cable, I take it out, I want to go and sell it. They sell it probably, for the sake of argument, for 100,000 naira. And you're happy that, 100,000, I've gotten 100,000 naira for this. But the absence of just that copper cable and the fact that the site has gone down can actually lead to loss of billions of naira in economic activity and revenues for all the stakeholders and all the users of that particular service that particular infrastructure provides, that the disruptor provides. So really, and that's where the prosecution aspects of offenders actually come in. And it's very good right now that the NSCDC, right, who is charged with primary agency charged with protection of those critical infrastructure, has moved to that direction, in the sense that you should not actually prosecute purely from the value of what was stolen, but you prosecute from the perspective of the damage, or rather the implication of the absence of what you have stolen actually led to. And that will lead to very serious and very, very serious prison terms for those that are involved. So at this juncture, I would like to appeal to Nigerians, because it's a very, very important thing. You don't want to risk your life for anything, for that matter. Don't talk of, say, because of you want to steal a battery, to take batteries out of sight. When you're caught, it's not a problem, or it's not a question of if anymore. It is when you're caught, you know that you are going for a very long time. So would you want to go for a long time or do something legal and make something legally and make sure that you can sleep with both eyes closed? Because you could feel that, oh, I've stolen things today, I've escaped. You think that you have escaped. No way, you have not escaped. It may take some time, but you'll be caught. And when you're caught and you're prosecuted under the Cybercrime Act and damaging to national infrastructure, you will actually go for a very long time. So there are some serious jail terms involved.
Let's look at the engagement so far with the public, your primary target. How well and how far has that been carried out?
Okay. For the public engagement, well, a couple of the things that we've done is with respect to putting out certain jingles. We've also sent out short message services using the mobile operators to send out short message services to Nigerians to inform Nigerians via their mobile phones, obviously, that damage of critical national infrastructure is a crime, and providing avenues for Nigerians to report. And it's good enough that we have been getting people actually reporting by dialing 622 to let Nigeria, and it's free of charge. You are not charged for calling that number. Once you call that number, you're able to speak with someone, a live person, and give the complaints. You are also able to send an email to NCC, to protect@ncc.gov.ng to report things. So we've been able to reach out to Nigerians from those perspectives. And having this sort of engagements also is one of those ways that we have also utilized. And we also engaged Nigerians even at their localities. I think yesterday, I believe, there was an engagement with the local governments in Lagos to meet with the stakeholders, to let them know at the local government level, to let them know the implication and the importance of protecting those infrastructures in those areas. And there are other mechanisms that we use, because we have programs what we call the Consumer Parliament, where we discuss with Nigerians. There was one we held earlier this month in Lagos, where we're able to articulate. It had to do with the Telecom Consumer Parliament, where we bring up consumer issues. Of course, we use those fora to engage Nigerians and enlighten Nigerians on what is happening. And because this order came out last year, and the operationalization has now kicked in fully, so we are now going to be seeing quite a lot of awareness campaigns in the various media spaces to try and make this very pervasive across the country.
I'm assuming that you say it's just kicking in.
Yes.
That there are no retroactive consequences for those, but within the period you have kicked in this order, have any sanctions been meted out? Or perhaps I should say, have we seen a drop in cases? I mean, you just mentioned some 20,000 cuts in a period of 6 months. How are we doing presently? Are you seeing anything to suggest that this has been an effective campaign?
Yes, obviously. One of the things that we've seen, the 20,000 was over a 6 month period. So that basically worked out to just a little above 3,000 on the average per month. But what we've seen in the last 2 months, that is in the last 3 months, between the months of July, August, and September, is that we've seen just about 2,500 fiber cuts, for example.
And
all right, so when you compare, you find out that we have now come down. So it's on the average about 2,000, about 800, and just about 800, a little above 800 on an average now every month from the initial 3,000. So we're actually coming down. But 800 is still too high. It's still too high. And one of the areas that we are now seeing, before now, we are seeing much more of the issues related with fiber cuts. But right now, we are now seeing some sort of transition towards access denials. And those access denials are coming from communities.
Good. And that's why I raised the question of how far you have gone, the reach, and these happen in local communities.
Yes.
Now, in the licensing of operators, some of these issues begin from that premise. Mm-hmm. Either there are claims that there are certain obligations that have not been fully executed by operators. And so what we're looking at some scenario that you could maybe at best regard as reactive. But what's in stopping these things from happening in the first place?
Okay. Now, let me go back. Let me go to the licensing aspect that you raised. Operators are licensed to provide services, telecom services, in areas of their licensing that covers their licenses covers. Now, when they provide these services in these areas, a lot of operators also engage in providing what they call corporate social responsibility in those communities, to trying to ensure that you get the buy-in of communities into as partners, basically. So you're coming to a community, obviously, to provide services. You're a commercial entity, but you want to also make sure that you provide certain infrastructure in those communities. And of course, a couple of operators have actually done that. But we've now had scenarios, for example, where an operator may now be asked to say, okay, you are bringing, you are coming to fuel your site. Before you fuel your site, you need to dig 4 boreholes for our community. You need to give employment to 20 of our people. You need to make sure that you tar the road from this place to this place. You need to make sure that the community school, you fix it. But of course, I mean, the operators as commercial entities will look at it to say, look, if I'm operating in your community, what if, for example, I'm making huge amounts of money from your community? Obviously, you'll be able to get that done. Because if every community says that, there's no way you can actually move. And that is where we've, of course, encouraged operators to make sure you don't alienate the community where you operate, as per CSR, in providing those CSR activities for those communities, obviously.
Which, of course, shows you that a lot of the advocacy you need to do would be at those local levels.
Obviously. Sure. You're very, very correct. You're very, very correct. And again, one of the things that the NCC is doing, like the case I mentioned to you as per the one we had in Lagos yesterday, we have zonal offices. So everything is not being driven in Abuja. So we have zonal offices across the various zones across the country. And what those zonal offices do is to make sure that they go to those communities and those states and meet even the traditional institution to try and get their support in institutionalizing this.
Well, as we begin to wind down, what you do is encourage people to see something suspicious and say something suspicious under this NCII order. However, knowing the society you are in, what protection is there for those who really see something and say something?
Yeah, of course, there's a lot of protection. There's a serious anonymity. I mean, when you call, the first thing is your anonymity is guaranteed. Your name does not come up anywhere. That, you've reported anything, all right? It's completely anonymous because, again, there are very strict rules that comes in line with privacy protection, in line with releasing any sort of data by anyone. From this perspective, it's only the NCC that will be able to tell who has called, and that can never come out.
Yeah,
and
because
even
you have the records.
Exactly, we have the records, so we can tell. But those information cannot, under any condition, come out. So it's very, very safe and very confidential.
All right. Well, it's been interesting talking to you. We'll have to leave it on that note. Happily, you say you're beginning to see a drop in the case of vandalism, while, unfortunately...
Cases of fiber cuts.
Fiber cuts,
yes,
while...
but it's still too high.
Yes,
still way too high.
And
that
then
we need
new
to
trends
really
are coming
down.
in. But you see in the next... how do you see this campaign going in the next 12 months?
Of course, in the next 12 months, we expect that at least a lot of Nigerians, more Nigerians will be much more aware of what the CNI is. They'll be much more aware of the value that those infrastructures that they see on towers in their areas bring to them, the criticality and the importance of protecting those infrastructures that is for their own well-being, not just for the service providers that's put in there. It's for their own well-being, whether it's from the social perspective. Those kits that they enjoy on their phones is not possible without those infrastructures. Those videos they watch, those that are influencers, those things they post, and all the other economic activities or social activities that they carry out can only be possible when they protect those infrastructures.
All right. Engineer Edu Yemi Ogo, Director Technical Standards and Network Integrity, Nigerian Communications Commission, Chairman of the Industry Working Group for the operationalization of the CNII order. Thank you for coming on One-on-One.
Thank you very much, Cyril. Right. Thank you.
That's our program today. Thank you for watching. Next week, we'll be back with One-on-One. I'm Cyril Stover. Bye for now.